we're open, but then we're also skeptical, right? So those duality, the feelings of both opposite emotions can actually exist. All right, well, I'm gonna say yes to this thing, yet I don't know if I could trust that person. Well, we're saying we're curious, but we're also reserved.
Welcome to the New Age Sage podcast, where you come to free your mind from all the things that keep you in suffering. Today's guest is Dr. Neeta Bhushan. Her brand new book, That Sucked, Now What, is out wherever you get books. I love this book. I've read a lot of books. This one was especially good, so please get it. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and enjoy today's episode because it was a very good one. Thank you. Neeta, welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, I'm so stoked that we're doing it. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So I've read a lot of self-help books, as you know most people in the space have, and your book was definitely on the top because it was so fucking real. I think a lot of self-help books ignore the reality of healing. They ignore the pain. They ignore the sucks. Right? Where I wanted to start is like, why in your book do you choose to make the suck the core of it? And why is the suck so important in our healing journey?
Oh, so good. Okay, we're gonna start here, Lucas. Okay. I wanted it to be light, because so often when we're going through the healing journey, the pain, we actually don't want to go through it.
Yeah.
It's too hard. So we numb, we avoid, we escape, we shove it under a rug, we deny it. We're like, I'm fine, I'm okay.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to dive in it, but I know that that's exactly what everyone's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
That sucked.
Yeah.
And I wanted to give permission for that sucked, whatever sucked, to actually live, to have breathing space, to have that space to actually be, so that then when we normalize whatever sucked, then it's not going to be shameful or as shameful or guilt-ridden or judgment around diving into the work around it, because we read a book and the book said we had to be a certain way, or the rabbi said I have to be a certain way, or that mentor that you or advisor that you look up to said, no, I want the best for you, and the best is, well, we've got to act a certain way.
Yeah.
And so we deny literally and suppress and squash down what we're really feeling, which is literally our humanity.
Yeah.
So I'm actually giving permission for people to let that humanity breathe. And sometimes it is painful. Sometimes it's ugly. Sometimes it's not the most high frequency, high vibe emotions. But I think there's a place for all of those. And we can kind of even look at it from what even Disney and Pixar is putting out in terms of like the types of movies that are getting created to actually say, hey, let's embrace the feels,
Yep.
Inside Out was one example of that.
Yeah.
Right. And then I don't know if you just saw, this one just came out a few months ago, and I think it's already up for some awards, Turning Red.
Haven't seen it, but I'll check it out.
Such a good one. It's such a good one because it talks about generational trauma, and it talks about, just kind of some of the things. The main premise of this actual movie is so good, because when this little girl, I forget her name is, I think it's Mylin. When Mylin gets really angry, or she, has a really big feeling, she's like laughing hysterically or really sad or depressed, she turns into a big red panda. And that big red panda that you can't really avoid, you can't hide, like so big. And she actually falls in love basically with this part of herself. But it's the same thing that her mom was cursed for, her grandmother, and like everyone in this lineage. So she, has to go through these rituals where they pray for her and all these things so that they can shun this red panda. But what that would mean is that she's always going to be stoic and, emotionally perfect and all of these things. And she's never really allowed to express then the truest sense of what we're meant to express in our emotions, right? Yep. And so her journey is to kind of own her voice and speak up to the generations before her, her grandmother and her mom, to actually say, hey, the little child in you actually wants to express her big red panda. So it was a really beautiful movie that really talks about it on a basic level.
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of summarize that perspective, is that on the other side of suck, which you don't want to feel, there's the reward of new meaning. of a new perspective or new side of yourself that you have to discover to then transcend into a different reality. How was that for you? When did you first realize that embracing the suck actually led to you developing a new side of yourself that you had to see and become?
Wow. I mean, so when I actually first recognized all of the healing that I had to do, this was probably 11 years ago. This was after my first like really big breakup.
Okay.
And it was my first marriage. And I thought like I had fallen in love, and I was like, all right, I've gone through a lot of things before that, which we'll get into. And I thought that, for the longest time, love was going to save me. And, love would be my ticket out of my big sorrows that I was trying to really hide and really shove under that rug. But what really needed to happen, and it definitely came up full surface and in full throttle in this relationship, was me allowing myself to focus on me and actually start with self love. And I would get into the most toxic relationship that would really bring up to the surface about what my biggest and greatest fear was, which was the fear of being alone. Because, a decade before then, I actually lost, my mom, my dad, and my brother,
Wow.
all
Sorry.
before I was 19. Yeah, thank you. And the insurmountable amount of pain in going through, the loss of pretty much my whole family.
Yeah.
Before I was 19, and then getting into my 20s thinking, I don't want anybody to feel bad for me. I had a younger brother that I had to take care of who was 5 years younger than me. So, I literally had these chips on my shoulder, and these chips on my shoulder were, nope, I'm going to overwork. I'm going to overcompensate. I'm going to do all these things. And you know what? I'm going to recreate a whole identity for myself where nobody then won't feel bad, because, this new identity that I'm going to create is going to be so far from the one that everyone feels bad for.
Yeah.
The one that where she feels broken, where she feels like, she's never going to heal. But that's the exact little girl that needed to. And so fast forward to that big major suck, I would have to gain everything in my power and my courage to actually say, no, this isn't right. Where my life was actually threatened by this person that I thought I loved, where I needed to actually take everything in the middle of the night, haphazardly leave that house that I knew and leave pretty much that life where, kind of like on the outside, I was a cosmetic dentist. So I had all of these like check marks of success. I was not even 30. I had a team that was working under me. But then, when I finally literally had the courage to say, okay, I can't do this anymore. I was at my lowest point. I was fully in the suck, and I was in the thickness of the suck where I had to, and I had no choice but to say, I need help.
Yeah.
And those are the 3 words that I said. I need help. And those 3 words would then be my mantra for literally the next, 6 years of my healing. So much so that, oh yeah, was a new identity born? Absolutely. Did I dive into the depths of my healing journey and grief and just, like fully letting myself go and cry? And, in the book, I kind of talk about even rituals around, creating grief practices for yourself. Whether it's a heartbreak or a job loss, or just you just know that you're evolving or transitioning out of something, maybe out of a funk or even a friendship or a betrayal, a deal that didn't go well, but that you're now starting to say, okay, the now what is a whole different version of you. And that was that very first time where I needed to say, oh, this is not just about that breakup.
Yeah.
It's about all of the things that I was hiding under that rug, that the rug got to be this high, where I basically tripped over it and said, I can't deny this anymore. I can't deny that part.
Yeah. What's key there is not bypassing the suck to get to now what. I think it's a big key here. And most people just want to go straight to, especially after grief, which maybe you went into or I went to a little bit, is just going straight to a new identity to numb the suck. For me, it was also achievement, like doing things, building this. That was my thing of like avoiding it. And then the suck comes, and then you're like forced to say, okay, now I really have to change, new perspective, healthier. But going back to the grief, how does that still show up for you now?
Oof, wow. I feel like it doesn't go away. You know, it'll come out in, I think, people that you meet sometimes who either remind me of one of my parents, or even, you know, my brother. He would have been 39 this year, actually, probably about a week ago. And it's interesting, you know, I have, you know, very, really deep male friendships, and 2 male friendships that I am so grateful for. Their birthdays happen to be in between my brother's birthday, my brother DJ's birthday. And I feel like I somehow, you know, and they have the same temperament as my brother. We have the same jokes as my brother used to have. So it's very real, but yeah, the grief will come out, you know, many times, especially in the beginning when I met each of them in, you know, their different states. And it's like, okay, to honor that part, because many times I feel like, you know, we can deny it and we can say, oh, okay, it's just a coincidence, or, oh, okay, yeah, I'm feeling that, but I'm going to squash it down with something else. And I think you know, what I like to say is to kind of give reverence to it and even honor that. And sometimes it's as simple as just saying it. It's as simple as saying it out loud, or simple as just like acknowledging it. And the first time where I told, actually, both of these friends, they're not related, but I said, you know, you totally remind me of my brother. And like, we just had a cry together, and it was like, oh. And so to be able to have that vulnerability and just share where you're coming from with that, you know, fine. In this case, this was somebody that reminded me of my brother. Maybe it's somebody that reminds you of a mentor, or maybe even a friend that you had, and that relationship didn't go well for whatever reason. But I think, you know, grief comes in waves. And I remember in the very beginning, when I had lost my father, because I was so close to him, I, you know, like every, you know, older brown Indian dad, or uncle, or man that I would come across, I'd be like, oh, wow, yeah, like another wisdom gem, or maybe, you know, my dad's kind of sending another messenger out, you know, just for that message. And I definitely believe in those angels, but I think that, you know, the grief can also come in, you know, in just in forms of different people.
Yeah, when you're grieving, when people are grieving, theme in the book was the threat of a fall while we're rising. So when we're in a space where feel like we're healing, we're progressing, I think many of us can get into a pattern of when that grief inevitably comes back a little bit, we feel like we can't go there because we're so attached to this new identity of being liberated and risen. So it's good to hear from an expert like you that no matter where you are, that you always have to give space for those moments of grief or resurfacing pain. But this is the next question: how can we give room for that resurfacing trauma, grief, or pain, and not go back to the original pattern that broke us in the first place?
Okay. So, yeah, I love the way that you're framing this question, because I think it's so important, you know, kind of piggybacking on what you just said. You know, the reason why even the book is called That Sucked, Now What? Not This Sucks, Now What? Is because, well, it's the past tense. That sucked. We're honoring what didn't go well. We're honoring the loss. We're honoring the grief. We're honoring this new path that we're on. And the now what is going to be sometimes slow. It's going to take its time. Sometimes it might be wobbly. Sometimes we've got, you know, we have a different pep in our step. And sometimes that now what's going to actually trigger another fall. You know, one of the frameworks that I talk about in the book that you're referring to is that fly forward framework. And yes, it starts with that fall. And also, you know, in order to not fully get stuck, which is what I call getting stuck in the suck, is, you know, there's 2 camps of people. The first camp of people is they have exposed themselves to a little bit of growth work, a little bit of personal growth, development, you know, kind of higher thinking thoughts and higher frequency emotions. So when something like a fall happens, there is no space. They're like, nope, I should know better. I should know better. So therefore, you know what, I'm gonna actually be grateful for this. Instead of giving room and presence for, well, okay, let's allow ourselves to feel. Let's allow ourselves to actually feel, well, what's coming up? Yeah, I'm feeling jealousy. I'm feeling rage. I'm feeling angry. I can't believe that person triggered me. But then we actually judge ourselves for saying, well, I thought I've worked on this wound. Why am I still getting triggered by that same person? And then we're judging that as well. And so that's where we're perpetually then getting stuck in that suck, versus kind of in the second camp where we can say, okay, well, there goes that jealousy again. Ooh, okay, that person's triggering me in this way. I'm getting angry. Man, you know, like the way that that person said something, I don't know why, it's like rubbing me the wrong way. We have that awareness, and what I call, you know, in the second part of the book, our radical self-awareness. And our radical self-awareness is really this, it's a muscle. It's literally an art of cultivating, okay, what feels right and what doesn't. Because even though we've done some of this work and done some of this healing, it's okay to actually allow ourselves to feel.
Yeah.
What happens is when we still go into the first camp and we get stuck in that, and that becomes our identity, where it's like, oh man, nothing ever good happens to me, because being in the victim mentality is literally, it feels good. It feels addicting. We get attention for it. Or even, you know, in that resentment bubble, it feels good to be mad at somebody else, right? Instead of taking that personal responsibility. Whereas in the second camp, we kind of are saying, well, actually, all right, I'm going to allow this feeling to persist for 10 seconds. Maybe if I didn't get that deal or that deal didn't go through, all right, I can allow myself to sit in the suck for a day, a weekend. I'm not going to let it go past X.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can be the judge of that. We can be the creator for that. You know, I have, you know, there's tools in the book where either, you know, set a timer for 2 minutes to allow yourself to really feel that suck, or set a timer for 10 minutes to allow yourself to fully grieve what didn't go well.
Yeah.
Or maybe if it's that bad that, you know, you worked on this project for months or even years and it didn't go through, or it just went bust, allow yourself that weekend. And again, you know, we don't have to get stuck, because we're actually in the driver's seat. We're in that control of saying, okay, here's my container. And while I have so many other things going on, I'm going to create this container, kind of like what we would do to celebrate a birthday, or, you know, celebrate the success of something. Can we also give reverence and honor to something that didn't go well and sit in the suck? But, you know, not for too long, because, you know, you're giving it that container. So 1 day, 2 days, a weekend, an hour, 5 minutes, great.
Yeah, what you're addressing is duality, the sense of which human beings really struggle with. It's holding space for two things at the same time, which is feeling a negative emotion or something wrong going on in your life somatically, while also accepting that, you know, you're at work or you're with your family, with your kids, and having that space to accept both truths. Why do you think it's so difficult for people to feel sad while doing what they have to do? Why is it such a hard thing to do for people, and how can people get better at it?
Oh, because we're not taught to do that. You know, like society says, all right, suck it up.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's move on. You know, I think even for guys, man up.
Yeah.
Let's go. I mean, even for me, you know, being just growing up with immigrant parents and growing up with a culture where, you know, you're lauded by your achievements, you're lauded by the good grades, you're lauded by, you know, all of the awards that you get and all of those things. When I was growing up, I was, you know, Neeta, you're resilient, you're strong. Strong girls don't cry, big girls don't cry. So then what do? Okay, anytime if I'm being validated by all of my good performing, or the fact that I can, wow, she's holding it all together.
Yeah.
Even after all these losses, well, what am I going to make meaning in my head? Well, that, oh, okay, that being good is, I mean, being good and being strong is the most noble thing. I mean, even as warriors, right? You know, like going into battle, right? The most noble warrior that didn't show emotion was the strongest, deserved the most respect. And you see this kind of like in the military sessions and or like the military community and even in movies. Yet the person who's showing, a little sign of quote unquote weakness or emotion is lauded as weak. We're just not given that space. Or God forbid, if the mom lashes out in the parking lot or gets, into a altercation, she's known as like the crazy bitch.
Yeah.
And the guy who loses his shit at somebody, he's the one with the anger problem. So where is this space for us to allow ourselves? And I'm not saying to release it on other people. Yeah. There's definitely healthy ways to release emotion. And, I definitely talk about it in the book. One of the ways that we can start doing this and actually allowing ourselves to feel the duality, right? I talk about it in, part 3 of the book, where when we are rising, it's totally normal, especially rising out of a breakup or coming out of something completely difficult and challenging and starting to create a new walk with that. Well, the first thing you're probably going to feel is, ooh, okay, I'm open. Like I have nowhere else to go. Like I've hit rock bottom. I can only go up from here, right? So you're going to feel open, but your heart is probably also going to feel skeptical. Mm-hmm. You're going to say, ooh, I don't know. This might not work for me, this thing. Yeah, it might have worked for my friends, but I don't know, I'm here. So it's like we're open, but then we're also skeptical, right? So those duality, the feelings of both opposite emotions can actually exist. All right, well, I'm going to say yes to this thing, yet I don't know if I could trust that person. Well, we're saying we're curious, but we're also reserved. Same complexity in our emotion. And one of the things that, I talk about in the book is called your bounce factor, how to actually, strengthen your bounce factor, how to cultivate this idea of resiliency that I kind of talk about in a way where, yeah, let's bounce. Let's not be rigid. And when we go into the Latin root word of resilience, it doesn't mean strong. It doesn't mean mental toughness, like what, everyone says it is. The Latin root is actually resiliere, which means to bounce. And so there are 4 pillars in order to actually learn how to bounce. And the first one, and this is what we're actually talking about, is, well, let's make peace with our upbringing. Let's look into and maybe even look back and see, well, how were we raised? Were we raised with the idea that emotions were a good thing? Like, were you actually praised for being a tough kid growing up, or being that person that didn't show emotion and, was always like the protector, was always the provider? Well, okay, well, what if you were the opposite of that? What would that feel like? What would that mean? Because for many years, I thought I couldn't show emotion because I thought that meant that I was broken, until I shared with you, until I couldn't hide it anymore. So one of the ways to do this is, let's start building our bounce factor. Let's start building this new muscle that is going to be completely different. It is going to feel a little wonky and wobbly because we're not used to operating this way. One of the ways to do that is, well, let's see, what were we taught? Like, let's go back into memory lane and see, how did that actually shape some of the relationships that we have in our lives? And did that lead to a breakup? Was it because I wasn't emotionally available? Was it because I was trying to, share my emotions and another person couldn't hold it because they were also dealing with their pain? So again, we heal the most in relationship, yeah. Right? Whether it's, family members, bosses, et cetera, we're going to meet people that is going to bring out the stuff, what I like to call the crud of what we still need to heal. Mm-hmm. And many times, if we haven't already worked through it, well, this is that opportunity that we can actually go deeper in that, so we can start inviting the anxiety to live with the joy, the grief to live with the excitement, yeah. The happiness to live with the sadness. Yeah. But it takes intention, and it actually takes compassion for ourselves, because we're not going to get it right the first time or the second time.
Yeah, I think what's important in all this, especially for me in my journey, is learning to feel without the stories of the past. It's a big one for me. Like if you have a trigger and you notice your brain, I call it the ego's resistance, like resisting the sensation through protective thoughts.
Yeah.
And it always thoughts from childhood or things like that. I've learned that to truly like bypass the emotion, not bypass, but to allow it to run through you, you have to try your best to feel it without entertaining the protective thoughts, which is really, I say it to most people and they're like, what the hell are you talking about, man? So maybe you can go into what's the difference between feeling something and then like feeling while entertaining all the thoughts from the past that were designed to not make you feel it. Like, what's the difference in those two and why should we focus on this one versus the other?
Yeah. So in what you're actually saying, it's it's our emotional body and our mental body. Our mental body is all of the thoughts that we have ruminating in our head.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, we basically, get a text message from a friend. Let's just say, all right, your last day is tomorrow. Or, this person screwed up a big project and oh my gosh, did you get so angry because you worked on it so hard for a really long time? Well, imagine this. You're behind your desk, you're sitting down or you're, on your couch, whatever, you have your phone, you get this text or you have your email, your computer, you're literally behind your desk and that worst case thing comes true.
Yeah.
And so what is the first sensation that happens? Oh crap, man, like we start ruminating, we start thinking, I can't believe I trusted that person. I can't believe that person cheated on me or whatever, done me wrong, all of these things. So all of these emotions in our head, these thoughts are running through our mind and we're going into our spiral. Sometimes we go into that victim spiral thinking like, why me? Why is this happening again? I thought I did this. Or we get really angry, we get frustrated, we get furious, or anxiety comes in. Like it's all of these emotions. So what do we tend to do? Well, we start thinking about it in our body. Our body starts to tense up. Because what are we doing? We're resisting it. We're resisting the emotions. We're like, no, I shouldn't feel this. I shouldn't feel this. I shouldn't feel this. But I'm actually feeling this. I'm actually feeling this. So your higher self is kind of saying, no, allow it. If you're actually allowing yourself the humanity of feeling that, but your higher self is also probably saying, no, I have to control this. I have to control this. Oh my gosh. But at the same time, the whole mix of this alchemy is going on while your body and your emotional body is actually showing you what you're actually doing. Yeah. And some of us listening to this or watching this might say, you know what, actually, yeah, when something like that's happened, I do clench my fist. And I do, or if I'm in the middle of a boardroom meeting and I'm in between and I'm seeing all my coworkers, I can't react how I would at home. So I'm clenching my fists. I'm, putting my hands on my legs, trying to hold myself together to be composed, or, maybe even noticing that I'm, clenching my jaws. I'm getting a tension headache. But what we're doing is we're just sitting there. We're sitting there instead of allowing ourselves to release what's the pressure that's happening in our head of this pressure cooker to kind of let the steam go.
Yeah.
And we're not doing anything about it. We just think, okay, let me just go swipe to numb the pain.
Yeah.
Because I, in that moment, need to choose a better feeling because I shouldn't act that way.
Yeah.
Instead of actually saying, oh, okay, I know, I see what's happening here. Okay, I'm getting triggered again. Oh, wow, that really fucking sucked.
Yeah.
I didn't get that thing. And even in the act, and I go into 5 to 6 steps on how to actually embrace the suck. The first step is acknowledging it. And maybe we have an anchor. And the first anchor that you're saying is, if you've never practiced this work before, to get yourself from out of your head and into your body, it is to actually say, wow, all right, that sucked. I can't change the past. I can't do anything about it, but that sucked. The second step is literally honoring yourself, putting your hand over your heart. There are studies that say, well, when we were 5, 6, 7, when we were young, when we came back from a bad day of school, all we wanted was the embrace of our caretaker. We ran home to mom or dad or aunt, uncle, whomever was taking care of us. We wanted that embrace. Well, in that moment, you can't go run to mom and dad. Yeah. You can be your own savior there, and you can actually put your hand over your heart and say, I got this. I got this. This is tough right now. What this physical sensation does is it moves you from your mental body to your emotional body to your physical body to say, I got you. It also actually starts to, work your good emotion, like the good juju of oxytocin and all these other.
It releases no more resistance. The resistance is gone.
It's gone because you're not trying to control it. You're welcoming it. You're saying, oh, wow, all right, I got you. This is it. Yeah. And it also releases your central nervous system. You got your nervous system because you're like, oh yeah, I'm actually breathing. Because typically when you get an email like that or a text message like that, we stop breathing or we start breathing shallowly. And then we're in our head again, ruminating. So I'm allowing you to actually, anchor the suck, embrace the suck, feel the suck, and actually then maybe you want to breathe into it, whatever tool you want to do after that to actually transform the suck, or sometimes even sit in the suck.
Yeah, in those moments, I like to tell myself, how fast can I return to objective reality? That's what I try and think, both externally and internally. Like, if, let's say you get romantically rejected, right? For me, it's like, that happened. And all the thoughts of control being like, no, it didn't, she did this and you don't know her. It's like, no, it happened, right? That's one. Two, it's what's true, objectively true in my body that I'm resisting. It's fear, abandonment, whatever it may be, is like externally and internally, what's true, what's real. And we have a hard time accepting both those things. And what counterintuitively, the faster we accept those things, the faster we can return to homeostasis, which what I appreciate in your book was that realness, was that there's no sugarcoating it. You have to accept what is. Like you truly have to accept what is, which in this world we can, bypass a lot. So what's some of the dangers of bypassing, spiritual bypassing, all that kind of stuff to forget about what's actually real?
So I would say, the first thing that most people do is, because let's just call the elephant out in the room. It's hard to sit in it, especially if, and what I'm even talking about is for folks who tend to spiritually bypass. This is for people who, in kind of our community, you're open or exposed to a certain amount of work. You've done retreats or better. You've cultivated this RSA, your radical self-awareness. So you're like, actually, I should know better. I shouldn't do this. Or this was something that happened before and wow, the same thing is happening again. Actually, I'm okay. I'm good. I got this. These are all examples of bypassing. Well, actually, no, you're not okay because that did actually happen. You're denying the fact that it did happen. No, I'm cool. I'm okay. I got it. Okay, it's cool, but let's dig into it. How did that actually make you feel? And this is actually one of even, a very simple journal prompt exercise to even ask yourself, in whatever that didn't go your way, whether it was a snub from a friend or a rejection from someone, that still sucked. And to even just acknowledge that in that suck. And here's the thing, when we bypass, what we start to do is we start to tell ourselves, okay, we're good. We go on this we're good train until we're actually not. We burst. Yeah. We bust. We burn out. It's kind of like what I did in my 20s. I'm like, no, I got this. I had that chip on my shoulder. I did a little bit of the therapy, even though, the therapy was subscribed by, teachers who were really afraid that something was going to happen because I was so young. Yeah. And then getting into my 20s, thinking that like, okay, I can be that dentist and take care of my health and nothing ever is going to, happen bad, right? Until I got into this relationship. And I think that the dangers of bypassing is we're literally allowing the same kinds of experiences to roll over into another person, into another circumstance, into another setback, until we actually look at it and say, oh, okay, wow, I'm actually not okay with rage. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually not okay with jealousy, because I'm attracting the same kinds of people that are going to spark that feeling and emotion of jealousy or rejection or, whatever the emotion is that we're denying or that we're pretending to be okay with. And I remember this so vividly. when I talk about this particular story in the book around me, becoming a mom for the first time. And, I got married, found the co-pilot of my life, did all the things. And, I entered the foray of motherhood, and literally going into postpartum depression was so real for me. I was like, where is this anger coming from? I've never seen it. But I literally, kind of had a flashback to when I was a teenager, when I first had like the doctors coming in the room telling me that my dad had, stage 4 lung cancer. I was about, 18 years old, but this was after losing my mom and my brother. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I couldn't get angry. And I just remember being so helpless because I just delivered my son, and here I am supposed to be so happy, but I just felt all the pangs of anger, and that was like coming literally through my body. And I'm like, oh wow, this is this like unresolved stuff, this like rage that was coming up from where it was not processed.
Yeah.
Even though I thought I had like gone through all the work, did all the retreats, all of the things, it was just coming up in another way. So when it's real, when we say that cliche, what we resist then persists. Yeah. And that is the danger of bypassing. What, we don't feel, we don't heal. That's the danger of bypassing. And it'll just start to show up in different ways, and it'll start to spill over in different aspects of our life.
Yeah. A new suck has the beautiful ability to invite you to release the past sucks.
Yeah.
It's true, and it feels like the last thing you want to do in that moment is because, people on the path, I can get cocky. I can be like, I've done this shit. I've done the trauma releases. I did, 3 months long of psychedelic releases. I've done it, right? And then, of course, the wrong trigger, the wrong moment, it all comes back. And I think it's important. A lot of people listening to this are probably in that industry, self-help coaching, and wanting to do it, but you have to remember that there's still that human in you. So being a big coach and successful, how do you ride that line between being like, I'm the coach, but I'm also a human? Is it ever difficult? Do you ever judge yourself in moments like that? Or?
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. And I love that you're asking this question, because I think for, this audience, like, you all know what to do. The thing is like, we're human. We're still going to have fuck ups. We're still going to have blow ups. We're still writing this journey, whatever we haven't processed. And, we can dive into all of the self-help books. The thing is I did not want to call this book even Fly Forward. That's the third part of my book. That was like what my publishers wanted to name it, to make it so quintessential.
It's so much better. It's way better.
Self-help.
Yeah.
But I wanted this to meet people where they were at, to give people permission to actually fight the elephant in the room, saying, okay, what did suck? Yeah, that did suck. And I'm honoring it. And I'm giving you permission to actually say, yeah, that fucking sucked. Like, I'm human. I'm also on the journey. I'm also doing the work. I was just doing a book signing yesterday at one of the, premier like bookstores here in Austin. And somebody did ask, like, what was the most challenging, process for you in writing this book? And I said, well, yeah, like the vulnerability hangover. Because I'm like, oh boy, did I just share too much? Yeah. But I think that, I think many times our ego starts to say, okay, I know this. Yes, I've done the work here. So I would just invite you, for avid, learners here in this space, to be like, where is your ego actually protecting you right now? Or yes, you probably know better, but we don't have to judge that emotion that's coming up. Yeah. That's valid and real. So let it breathe. Yeah. Give it the space that it needs. Do those rituals that you know how to do. Go for a walk. Go scream it out loud. Do the traumatic processing. Like, take your flavor and pick. Shake it out. Journal it out. Say it out loud. But at least honor whatever that emotion is. Oh, yeah, I'm in my head again. Yeah. Okay, I'm actually feeling the anxiety that's coming up. And I'm trying to deny it, but it's actually here right now. And I try to be, like, I think why people are really loving this book so much is because in between that sucked, where it is that victim mode, and the now what, which most of our audience will go directly to the now what. Yeah. That's the victor mode, the hero mode. I'm actually asking you to live in between the vulnerability mode to actually say, yeah, bro, I'm like in it right now, or love, like, this is it. This is like a struggle for me. And, I think when we're actually coming from a place of honesty, coming from a place of, yes, authenticity, but real, true, radical honesty, and being unapologetic in saying, well, this is where I am right now. Because we have to also take, precedence of like, what season and stage are you in right now? Like I just shared again yesterday, I was like, yeah, it's been tough for me to actually go through, mom guilt around leaving my kids, even though, they're so small, they're so tiny, while knowing that I also, like had lost my mom, and she was working a lot too. So that still comes up for me. Mm-hmm. So I think, where writing that line as a coach, as a teacher, as somebody that speaks as well on this, I'm such a big advocate of letting people in to your world, because they're going to give you so much more respect, and you're giving them permission to be like, actually, yeah, he's just human. Mm-hmm. We're all just, maybe some days we have a bad day, and that's okay. But we can get up and have compassion for ourselves to say tomorrow's going to be a different day. And all right, like, let's ride this.
What do you think is the line between if there ever is a thing, over feeling, overdoing it, and not doing it? Because I've noticed that, which is it's hard to create that line. For example, like sensing an emotion that's even resisting, right? It's important to feel that. What if that's been an addiction to like always being in that zone? So how do you actually craft that line between, should I really dive into this and be all about it? Or in this moment, is it better to just say, you know what, I may be past diving into this so deep? So what's that line, and how do you know where the line is?
Oh, yeah. So this is where the RSA comes in. This is where, like in the second part of the book, we talk about, I talked about the upbringing, like making peace with that. But then it's getting into the second part, which is your emotional capacity to feel. So, for some of us, that is, all right, allowing ourselves to feel the opposite emotion, right? If we're overly optimistic, if we're overly the ones that are, looking for the next thing, the next step, and maybe that you probably have a negative Nancy in your corner that's like always negative. Everything bad is always happening to them. You probably don't even want them in your circle. You're like purging out of that friendship, but that was somebody that was your ride or die like 5 years ago, but nothing seems to ever be going right with them. That person is probably addicted to their suck.
Yep.
And that person is probably like, no matter what you try to inspire them, no matter what you try to send them a book, and they're just like, no, man, this is not going to work for me. Okay, well, that person, like if they were open to it, that person could actually then start to shift and change and say, hey, if they were building their emotional capacity to feel, like, how good would it feel to embark on the feeling of gratitude and, acknowledging them for that gratitude? Well, who knows if they're ever going to make it there. Mm-hmm. But for somebody like yourself, who's on the opposite side of that, that's looking at the overly optimistic state, well, can you actually feel the opposite? That's where that duality comes in again. And knowing and jumping into the RSA, your radical self-awareness, that's where we can actually say, oh, okay, if my MO is normally thinking that, okay, I'm doing that thing again. I'm actually picking that trait again. I don't want to feel this, like I'm feeling this resistance, because that your body starts to react and you feel like the puffiness in your chest and you're kind of like, oh, something is happening. Well, that there's that invitation for you. Our body sends us these signals, right? It's like when we touch a hot pan, we know it's freaking hot, because if we keep holding it, we're going to burn our hand. So our body sends us signals in terms of, well, can we honor the puffiness in our chest, or the knots in our stomach, or, the clenching of our jaws? And that takes, a certain level of awareness. And to know that, well, are we actually addicted to this? I think it's definitely a sense of, all right, because many times when we're constantly in our head thinking about this, we can overanalyze and we can overjudge ourselves, and we can, constantly think, okay, am I doing too much? And we're in our minds around it, but our body's not going to, it's like the research where, they've done where they've taken like different aspects of the body where we're holding different emotions. Yeah. Our body's not going to lie to us, right? Because that's the physiology of where anxiety lives, right? And if we're constantly in that, flight, fight, or freeze mode, try to say that 3 times, we're going to be kind of like reactive, and we're going to be kind of like up in arms. So I think it's our ability to actually lean into it ourselves and say, okay, I've actually been spending too much time here. Like, what's the opposite of that?
Yeah.
And that's a practice. Yeah. And that doesn't come overnight. That takes, it takes time.
What's hard about that too is I was just talking to my sister about this, where she's recently embarking on the path, and she's progressed a lot. And she's at a spot now where she called me and she said, sorry if I'm spilling your beans, but she was saying that like the darkest thoughts she used to have back in the original state were flying back at her, which to me shows that no matter how far we are outside our comfort zone, or not comfort, like the zone we're used to, the more that zone's going to call out for you to come back. So you could be really, really ahead, and out of nowhere you have these thoughts that are just, whoa, where the hell did that come from? Yeah. So how can you navigate that frustration or like handling those like day one thoughts? Yeah. Like those day one, like super traumatic, heavy thoughts when you're so far away. It's tough, and I think that's actually what brings people back all the way. So do you still deal with those thoughts every now and then from the beginning?
Oh my gosh.
How do you handle them?
Yeah. Again, giving it space to breathe.
What does that look like?
So giving it space to breathe. So the other day I was just dealing with, with mom guilt. Mm-hmm. So let's take that. And I think, even this idea of, oh wow, I'm feeling guilty for not being there for, let's just say, for whomever, for my family or for even friends, because I've been on a lot of interviews, I've had to travel, have to stay up late, even having guilt for not even being there for my partner, right? And I think for a lot of listeners, they could probably relate to that, right? Having something big happen and you're super excited about that, but at the end of the day, you're kind of like, oh man, I feel like I'm letting somebody else down. So I could actually, judge it and say, oh wow, like I thought we'd been through this, like, and my higher self actually knows, well, I would never want my kids to, feel guilty for doing and living their best life when they get older. Like and my parents always, from like the beginning, they always suggested that, fine, it was like education first, but it was never a question, right? To focus on whatever we wanted to do. I mean, granted, it had to be like doctor, dentist, lawyer, engineer, and that's a different story. Mm-hmm. But I think that looping back into, again, what your higher self is thinking, like, oh yeah, that's right. I would totally want my kids to live for themselves. Like, I would never want them to say no to an opportunity just because they thought mom was going to feel guilty about it, So then why am I feeling this guilt for me trying to, expand and create and have this impact as well? Is there something else? So then I'll go into my processing, my journaling, which is, okay, is this feeling, is this emotion true? Am I actually not being there? Am I actually letting somebody else down? What's fact and what's living in my head? Because many times we obviously are the worst critics of ourselves, and we go into our spiral super fast and it's quick. And so then it's, either, most of us are either orators where we need to talk it out loud, and some of us need to process via journaling, right? And which is why journaling is such a big thing, because it activates a different part of our brain. And this is not the one that's like, this is more of a rest and digest activity, which we're not, again, judging ourselves. It's just allowing ourselves to write down whatever it is on paper. And so it's a cathartic act. It's an act of, all right, finding that grace. But again, it's the component of compassion. And it's very easy to get caught up in our rumination. It's so easy to get caught up in like, but I'm doing that thing again, and I don't know. And it's and if we go into that dark hole, and if we don't have a way of, going back, well, let's look at some of the tools. And in the book, I talk about a ton of different tools. And this is that second pillar of, the bounce factor. It's looking at our current environment. And if our current environment is, are we exposing ourselves to good stress? And when we talk about good stress, it's actually sometimes we have to do the opposite. So, all right, we said we've done this work, but if I'm constantly ruminating at my bad thoughts and these thoughts are getting really dark and really heavy, and I know that I can't sort this out myself, the journaling is not taking me out, I've given myself processing, I still have my guides, my healers, my body workers, my whole arena of support system, my therapist, my coaches, that I can call on professional help to actually help me get out of that suck.
Yeah.
And I think many times, once we've done a certain level of work, we think, oh, we're past that. No, I can figure this out on my own. And that's where the ego comes in. That's where we then get stuck. So I would actually invite somebody to, yes, do all these processes. And it starts with first that self-reflection. And it starts with first, like, okay, is that really true? Do you really think that about yourself? Did that really happen? All right, well, when did that happen? Like, list out the facts of that, because we've got to separate the fact of, did you really let that person down, or is this in our mind? Yeah. And then when we're rationalizing that, well, how are we actually feeling it? How are we feeling it in our body? Where is that coming from? But if we don't have that pillar of support where we have, that professional help, or even what I like to call our soul support posse, and that soul support posse could look like, healers and even friends that we could look at and ask, hey, what have you noticed in me? And, or like, I just feel like I need to just vent. Do you have 5 minutes? And this has got to be somebody that's trusted, that like, that they're not going to judge you in this way, that they can actually see you and witness you and observe you and even, hold you while you process that funk. Yeah. I mean, it's easy to do it by yourself, but there are going to be some of you that's like, well, maybe I could call a friend, and to allow other people also in that space. So, there's a whole list of how we can actually create and even look at, well, where are we inviting good stress? So if you're somebody to process on your own, go get a buddy. And invite that buddy and say, hey, like, I'd love to, dive in with you. Of course, they've got to be on the same, like-minded playing field. If you're somebody that like resists, like sitting in cold showers or doing a cold plunge, well, all right, let's shake that perspective and let's see what that brings up. If you're somebody that's like usually does, sitting in meditation for 10 minutes, 20 minutes silently, well, what about some chanting meditation? What can that do? Because as we know, chanting also opens up our throat chakra. It activates our vagus nerve. Our vagus nerve helps with recalibrating our nervous system. So there's a whole bunch of these different practices also in the book that actually shifts us, because it's also, when we're doing the work for a really long time, we know all of these tools, but we've got to shake the tool belt a little bit. Yeah. We've got to give it a break and kind of recycle some of them so that can actually bring up new perspective. Because I think that's the big thing. We get stuck in certain ways of doing things, and then we are more likely to then relapse into some of our old patterns. But all we need to do is kind of like, shake out our little tool belt, look at our current environment and see, oh, okay, where am I being complacent? Oh, has it actually been 2 years since I gone to see that therapist or had a session with that coach? I think probably it's time for a refresh.
Yeah. I like to think of what's the complete opposite of what I've been doing right now. It sounds simple, but it really is true. Like if it's a coping mechanism, or, if it's an instinct to go on social media or do something to numb, I'm always like, what's the complete opposite of what I could do right now? It could be something weird, like dancing or singing. It's just truly just getting out of, like, picking yourself up with love and being, like you're not doing this shit anymore. You're just really not. Why is that? So it's crazy that complete opposite for some people could just be asking for help. it's so counterintuitive for so many people's ways to say, hey, I need help. Why is that? Like, at its core, asking for help should be comfort zone. It should be
Mm-hmm.
what we're wired and nurtured and raised to do. Why do you think it's become the opposite of that?
Oh,
Why is it actually like the danger zone for someone to ask for help? I even still see it in myself these days, uh, getting cocky and stuff, but we'll unpack that a little bit.
yeah. Oh, yeah. So let's unpack it. I mean, I think, well, first and foremost, it's definitely, again, we should know better.
Yeah.
And, it's definitely, again, like, oh, okay, well, what were we told? Like, figure it out. Like, you've got all the solutions. What's your solution, right? Like, how many of us have been told, like, figure it out? And many times, again, what does our society like favor? It's favoring, all right, we're going to fix it. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix it, not
Mhm.
you. And so we take it upon ourselves because it's noble. We're thought of as warriors when we can rise above and against all odds. And I didn't have any help in this. Well, no, but what if you ask for help? Well, asking for help then is that sign of weakness. And it's that sign of, oh, you're broken.
So it's also accepting you're broken, which I think
Yeah.
is part of it. Yeah.
It's accepting that, yeah, it's accepting that you're broken, that you couldn't do it on your own. And, it's the complete opposite of how most of us were raised. And that's why it's the hardest thing to do, but the most liberating. Because, if you've ever thought of that time where you actually said, hey, like, I need your help, most people would actually say, absolutely, yes. Like, what can I do for you? Because most people just want to be there to support you.
And if they don't, not the one for you.
And then
At the
they're
same
not the,
time, yeah.
yeah, and then they're not the one for you. If, this reminds me of like this time where, when I actually I had so much ego driving me, and I had just told, I'd packed up everything, and I left for my new life after my divorce. And I remember the first day, and mind you, not even 30 years old, I had this big team, and I was going into my office. I had all of this like stuff for my home packed up in my fancy, SUV, which I literally owned the name. My name was on that door, but I was so scared to go into that door. There's the first day that I would be showing my face to my team. And I remember I was like so anxious. I was so nervous. I didn't know what was going to happen. I felt like I wanted to cancel patients. I was a cosmetic dentist. And so I wanted to cancel patients. I just wanted to cancel the day, but I couldn't already because I was like, all right, because Neeta in the past was like, all right, she's got this. She's going to push through it like she always does. This is not going to phase her. And so I get there and I'm like working on, this patient, and I remember it was a very busy day. So if you imagine you ever go to the dentist, like, people's got, suction in their mouth, all the chairs are, the room is filled, the waiting room is filled. We had about 4 chairs. And basically I just felt like, I couldn't hold it in anymore. And tears just were like coming down my face. And this poor, this poor patient, like I had like my mask on, my goggles on, so you couldn't really see. But I just said, I stood up and I like, I talked on the, we have like a little intercom, and I said, everyone in the break room right now. And you could just hear my voice chuckling. And I was so nervous to share this. But I said, listen, guys, I'm going through a terrible breakup. I just left my house. I got to figure out where I'm going to stay. I don't even know. Like, and I just broke down, and I was just like, it was everything that I was holding in. I didn't want my team to, most of these people were older than me. I already had a chip on my shoulder of being such a young, dentist and all these things. And I'm like, I just felt like 1,000 bricks just like started, releasing as the words came out of my mouth. And literally the thing that I was so afraid of sharing, I'm going through a divorce. I'm going through this big breakup. I don't know where I'm going to live. And I even said, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to keep this open for you guys. So if some of you need to figure out stuff for your families, like I get it, but like I'm going to just need your help for the next few months as we kind of sort this out. So, picking up shifts whenever, like, and then literally everyone in that room was like, oh my God, we got you. Like,
Yeah.
don't you
What
worry.
you're describing as a key difference is that you were completely owning your role in it. You're saying, I'm owning these emotions, and people can actually react to that with respect and love. But when people often express their emotions, it's through blaming people in front of them or projecting things or being a victim. So it's like you can do that and then people won't receive you well. And then you think that, oh, I can't show emotions. But it's not that. It's exactly what you're saying is that if you're going to do it, like really own it and be vulnerable and don't project expectations or problems that they're doing that's their fault. So what sounded there was a complete ownership, and that ownership was attractive and freeing for them too, because they probably could see it and be like, oh, now I actually have space in this environment to maybe say how I feel one day.
Oh yeah. Well, and also, it's liberating to see kind of, and this is actually what changed for me and literally began my trajectory of talking about compassionate leadership, because it was coming from a place of, all right, I'm not perfect. I'm going through my own shit too.
Yeah.
And we don't know what's going to happen. But here's where we're at in letting people in. I think even I gave this talk at Google like literally a few years after that time, where I never thought in a million years I was a cosmetic dentist that I would get invited to talk about grit and resiliency at Google, their headquarters. But it was the same kind of thing. It was talking about how to be vulnerable in the workplace even. And I shared that story around, this is the worst thing that was going on in my life that I was hiding. And how can, many of us take some of this and actually share whatever is going on, whether it's, listen, we're probably not going to make our goal this month, but I just want you to know that like you guys are working really, really hard, and being honest in that, and actually, not taking that away from anybody. But that's how people get closer, and that's how trust is built. That's how deeper connections are built. It's different when, you're hanging out with a friend and you're asking them, hey, like, what's really going on? Or what are you processing lately? And they're like, no, I'm cool. Everything's great. Versus, you're with a friend and you're actually like, yeah, this is the stuff that I'm working through right now. This is what's been hard. This is what's been interesting. And here's where I'm at. I think there's a different set of, a friendship that could actually be birthed just because you've had this string of, a shared experience and shared vulnerability there.
Yeah. So we have to start wrapping up, unfortunately. But I wanted to ask one last question. I always try and give quick, practical advice because people want to do these days. They don't want to do the longer, harder stuff. So
yeah,
what's the quickest way someone can go from resisting their suck to accepting it?
Just say, that sucked. Now what? You have that mantra. Or, pick whatever mantra. In my darkest days, I even would say, okay, I'm brave. I'm brave. I'm brave. I'd put my hand over my heart and I would just recite that. So, it could be a prayer, it could be a mantra, it could be something, but have that anchor that helps you acknowledge what is happening, because the closer and faster that you can actually accept where you're at, that's going to help you.
Great answer. Where can people find you at? I'm sure they'll want to look at all your stuff. So
yeah,
where can they find you?
Absolutely. Well, I hang out on IG at Neeta Bhushan, and you could definitely grab the book That Sucked, Now What, from Amazon, or, you could just even go to thatsuckednowwhat.com. We have tons of resources. It even comes with a free 44-page guidebook, and even comes with a 5-day healing journey to actually alchemize a lot of the suck moments. And it starts with day one healing, our relationships.
Amazing. Well, Neeta, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, this was so amazing. Thank you for having us.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to watch more content, click this video right here. And please don't forget to subscribe right here. Thank you.